Disclaimer: this story explores mature emotional themes between adults. Viewer discretion is advised. I never expected to feel anything like this, especially not here, not now, and definitely not with him. It was a rainy Sunday when I moved into David's house. My new husband had insisted on me feeling at home, even though I wasn't sure what home meant anymore. The last few years had been a blur: divorce, rebuilding, and eventually remarrying a man I thought would bring calm to my life. But I hadn't considered him. Ethan, David's son from a previous marriage, was already in his late 20s, closer to my age than his father's. We'd only met briefly before the wedding, but that moment stuck with me. The way he looked at me, too long, like he was reading something behind my eyes. I'd dismissed it as awkwardness. Or maybe curiosity. Now here we were, under the same roof. The first few days were civil. Cordial. He was polite but distant, like someone trying too hard not to be seen staring. But the more we crossed paths, the kitchen in the morning, the garden in the afternoon, the more I noticed the tension. Subtle, electric, and undeniably there. One night, after David left on a last-minute business trip, it finally broke. I was curled up on the couch, flipping through an old photo album from my first marriage. I don't know why I kept those photos. I wasn't hung up on the past, just not ready to throw it all away. The living room was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the soft clink of ice in my glass. Ethan walked in, shirt damp from the rain, his eyes catching mine like I was a thought he'd had too often. I meant to say something light, casual. But instead, I just watched him walk over and sit down across from me, closer than he ever had before. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at the album, then back at me. And then he said it. "I've dreamt of you like this." I felt the air shift. My chest tightened, not in fear, but in something more dangerous. Something warm and terrifying. "What did you say?" I asked, even though I'd heard him clearly. He didn't blink. "I've dreamt of you. Not in this house. Not with my dad. Just you, smiling like this. Looking at me like you're about to run." I should have gotten up. I should have said something sharp, reminded him who I was, who he was. But I didn't, because for one breathless second, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit. I'd been dreaming too. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Ethan's words echoed in the quiet. "I've dreamt of you like this." Not as a joke, not a slip of the tongue. He meant it. And it wasn't just the words, it was how he said them. Like he'd been carrying that truth for a long time, waiting for a moment I never saw coming. By morning, I told myself to shake it off. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe I misunderstood. But when I walked into the kitchen and saw him already there, freshly showered, leaning against the counter with a mug in hand, I knew this wasn't going to go away. "Morning," he said, casually. Too casually. "Morning," I replied, reaching for the coffee pot, avoiding his eyes. But he didn't move, didn't leave. He watched me the way someone watches a fire, afraid to touch it, but unable to look away. "You used to be a teacher, right?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. I blinked. "Yeah, English lit." I stopped after the divorce. He nodded. "My mom was a teacher too. I barely remember her, though." That was the first time he'd mentioned her. David rarely talked about her either, just that she passed when Ethan was 10. The way he said it now, almost offhand, made something in me ache. I wondered how much loss he'd buried beneath that calm exterior. I finally looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't just David's son. He was a man carrying quiet grief, shaped by absences no one ever filled. And here I was, someone who was supposed to step into their lives, smile at the dinner table, and play pretend. But something had shifted between us. We both felt it. Last night, I began, trying to stay grounded. "What you said, I meant it." He didn't hesitate. I froze. "You can't." "I already do." There it was, plain, brutal, honest. The kind of thing you say when you're too tired of pretending. I backed away, heart racing. "Ethan, I'm married to your father." "I know," he said softly, But you're not his. Not really. That stopped me. How did he see through me so easily? I thought I'd hidden it, the doubts, the loneliness, the way David felt more like a safe decision than a soulmate. I turned away before he could read more from my silence. Behind me, he said, "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." And then he left. Just like that. But he'd already changed everything. I thought putting distance between us would help. That I could stuff what happened back into a quiet corner of my mind and pretend nothing had changed. But the air between me and Ethan wasn't neutral anymore. It was charged, always humming with the memory of what he said and what I hadn't said back. That morning, David came home. He walked in smiling, suitcase in hand, talking about meetings and missed dinners like the world was still turning the way it always had. I smiled too, kissed his cheek, played the role. Ethan stayed in his room. Later, David pulled me aside. "Is Ethan okay?" He seemed off. My stomach tightened. "I'm not sure. Maybe just tired." "He's been quiet." David nodded, but not with concern, more like disinterest. "He gets that way sometimes. He'll snap out of it." That was the moment something cracked open in me. The way David dismissed his son like Ethan was a roommate, not family, made me see him differently. Or maybe see what I'd been trying to ignore. I started noticing other things. How David never asked about my writing. How he spoke over me in conversations. How he lived beside me, not with me. But even more dangerous than noticing him, I started noticing Ethan. He avoided me at first. Polite but distant. No more morning coffee run-ins. No shared glances. I told myself it was for the best. Until 3 days later. I came home early from errands to find Ethan on the back porch, smoking a cigarette, eyes fixed on nothing. I hadn't even known he smoked. I stepped outside, closing the screen door behind me. "That'll kill you." He didn't flinch. Maybe that's the point. Something in his voice was raw. Too raw. I sat down beside him, keeping a respectful distance, but still close enough to hear him breathe. "You okay?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I looked at him. He didn't mean it as a question. "I never wanted to come back here," he added. "But my dad offered to help with grad school. Said I could save money, get back on track. But he doesn't see me. He sees a box checked. A responsibility managed." He looked at me then, really looked. "But you see me. That's the problem." I didn't know what to say. Because he was right. Just then, the door creaked open. David's voice carried out. "Everything okay out here?" We both jumped. Ethan flicked his cigarette over the railing. "Yeah, just catching some air." David nodded and disappeared back inside. But he'd stepped out at the exact moment he needed to. He didn't know it yet, but the house he returned to wasn't the one he left. And neither was the woman waiting in it. I told myself I could handle it. That if I just kept my head down, played the part, it would pass like a storm. But storms don't pass when you're still standing in the middle of them. It was a Friday night. David had planned a dinner, his way of reconnecting, though it felt more like a forced performance. The three of us sat at the table like a family. Him at the head, proud. Me beside him, smiling too hard. Ethan across from us, silent, eyes dark with something I didn't have a name for yet. Halfway through the meal, David mentioned a trip. Just a quick conference in Chicago next week. 3 nights, tops. He said it casually. I felt my stomach sink. Ethan looked up. Met my eyes. Something in the air shifted. After dinner, David poured himself a scotch and disappeared into his office. I started clearing the dishes, hands shaking harder than I wanted to admit. Ethan followed me into the kitchen. He didn't speak. Just stood behind me while I scrubbed a plate I'd already cleaned twice. You should go, I said without turning around. I'm not the one who keeps staying, he said. I spun around, the plate still in my hand. You don't get to do this. Do what? Feel something I didn't ask for? His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. I've tried, okay? I've tried to push it down. But you're everywhere. You move through this house like you belong here, but you don't, not with him. I stared at him, stunned by the rawness of it. He stepped closer. He doesn't see you. But I do. Every minute. Every breath. And I know it's wrong. But it doesn't feel wrong when I'm near you. It just feels real. I backed up against the counter, the cool granite pressing into my spine. This isn't just about him. This is about everything we can't be. And what if it already is? He asked, eyes locked on mine. The door creaked. We both froze. David was standing there, his scotch glass half full, his face unreadable. How long? He said. Calm, too calm. Have you two been playing house behind my back? My heart stopped. David, it's not, I started, but the look in his eyes silenced me. Ethan stepped forward, jaw tight. It's not what you think, isn't it? David asked, voice cold. Because from here, it looks exactly like betrayal. The silence that followed was louder than shouting. For the first time, I realized this wasn't about choosing between them. It was about choosing myself. And the price of that choice was everything I thought I'd built. David didn't yell. That was the worst part. He just stared, like he was waiting for one of us to blink first. When no one did, he turned and walked back to his office, the door shutting behind him with a softness that felt more dangerous than a slammed one. Ethan left the kitchen without a word. I spent the night on the couch, heart pounding so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. The next morning, David was gone. No note, no call. Just his car missing from the driveway and his office door ajar, like he wanted us to know he left, and why. I didn't see Ethan until evening. When he finally came downstairs, his face was drawn, pale, like he hadn't slept either. We have to talk, I said, voice low. But before I could say more, he pulled out a letter. Folded, creased, like it had been in someone's drawer for years. I found this, he said. In my dad's office, buried in an old file under his insurance papers. I hesitated. What is it? He handed it to me. It was addressed to David. Postmarked from 18 years ago. From a woman named Lisa Bennett. My stomach turned. Ethan watched me closely. Lisa Bennett was my mother's best friend. She used to babysit me sometimes. I barely remember her. I unfolded the letter and read. And with every line, the room tilted. It wasn't just a letter. It was a confession. Lisa hadn't just been a friend. She'd been in love with David. They'd had an affair during his marriage to Ethan's mother. She'd gotten pregnant. But the letter wasn't about love. It was about guilt. About David threatening her into silence. About her son, her and David's son, being adopted out to a safe, faraway family after she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The math clicked. The dates. The timeline. I looked up at Ethan, horrified. He nodded slowly. She gave birth 9 months after my mom died. I always thought I was an only child. My voice cracked. Ethan, you're not. He stared at me. No, I whispered. You can't be. I'm not David's only son, he said. And you're not just my stepmother. I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. The realization hit. Ethan had a half-brother. And that brother was my ex-husband. The man I divorced before meeting David. The man I had a son with. Ethan sat down, pale and silent. We were no longer dealing with forbidden feelings. We were tangled in something deeper, messier, a family secret that connected us in ways neither of us had imagined. Whatever we thought this was, whatever it might have become, it could never be the same. Everything had changed. I couldn't breathe. The letter was still in my hands, but I couldn't feel it anymore. My fingers were numb. My body frozen. Every piece of my life, my past, my present, my so-called future, was suddenly connected by a thread I never saw coming. Ethan paced the living room, fists clenched at his sides. So let me get this straight. My dad had an affair, lied to everyone, and gave away his second son, who just happens to be your ex-husband. I nodded, barely able to speak. And your son, he stopped, staring at me like he couldn't say it out loud. That makes me, what? His uncle. The word hung between us like poison. I didn't know, I whispered. I swear, Ethan. I had no idea. He didn't answer. Just sat down, burying his face in his hands. It was over. Whatever we thought this was, the tension, the near kisses, the late-night conversations, it all shattered under the weight of something we couldn't undo. And yet, in the silence, I felt it again. That pull. That undeniable connection. Not just attraction, but understanding. A kind of loneliness that had found its reflection in another person. Ethan finally looked up, his voice low. I didn't fall for you because you were my stepmother. I fell for you because you saw me. You made me feel like I mattered. And now all I can feel is shame. I don't want you to feel that, I said, tears stinging. I don't regret what we shared. But we can't keep pretending we're not standing on top of something broken. There was a long pause. Then he stood. I need to go. Where? I don't know. Away from this house. From him. From all of it. I didn't try to stop him. Instead, I reached for the framed photo on the end table, me, David, and my son from years ago. I stared at it, thinking about how one man's lies rippled into every corner of our lives. Thinking about how we'd all been trapped by his need for control. I took a breath, steadying myself. And then I made a decision. I packed a small bag, wrote a letter to David, told him I was leaving, not for Ethan, but for myself. Because I was done being someone else's afterthought. I needed to start again, somewhere honest. Before I left, I texted Ethan one thing. You were never a mistake. Don't let him convince you otherwise. I didn't know if he'd reply. I didn't know what would happen next. But as I closed the door behind me, for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Free. 2 months later, I was living in a small rental near the coast, nothing fancy, but quiet, with ocean air that helped me breathe again. I'd started teaching part-time at a local community college, and for the first time in a long time, I was choosing my own direction, not walking someone else's path. Ethan and I hadn't spoken since that night. Part of me wanted to reach out. Another part knew we both needed space to understand who we were without the chaos between us. Sometimes love, or what we think is love, blooms in the middle of pain. And sometimes, letting it go is the most honest thing you can do. David never responded to my letter. I heard through mutual friends that he took a leave from work. Maybe to process everything. Maybe just to hide. I don't know. And honestly, I stopped needing to know. His control, his secrets, those were never mine to fix. Then, out of nowhere, I got a letter in the mail. From Ethan. No big declarations. No apologies. Just a page of clarity. He'd moved to Oregon, transferred schools, and started therapy. He was reconnecting with his birth mother's extended family, learning things about himself he'd never had the chance to before. He ended the note with something simple. We weren't meant to last. But you helped me wake up. Thank you. I cried when I read it, not out of sadness, but relief. We both walked away without bitterness, without pretending. That's rare. And my son? I finally told him everything about my past, the mistakes I made, and the truths that came crashing down. He was quiet at first. But when I was done, he hugged me and said, I just want you to be happy. That was enough. Life moved on. Not with fireworks, not with a perfect ending, but with peace. And that's more powerful than any fantasy. The lesson? Sometimes love shows up in the wrong chapter. Sometimes family isn't what you thought it was. And sometimes walking away is the bravest way to love yourself. We were a tangle of mistakes, secrets, and misplaced hearts. But in the end, we found something better than romance. We found truth. And in truth, we found freedom. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Romance, drama, shocking confessions, or something else entirely? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, emotional stories like this one.